GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm Angela from Wigan and I won £30,000 with the Great British Giveaway. I'd say to people who want to enter or are wondering whether to enter to do it, it happens to people like me.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Should we talk about the weather?
Yes.
Because apparently, all of this weather is leading to bunk-off Monday, Dawn.
Yeah, this is the front page of the Daily Star, which is a very attractive picture of a potato on a couch. So everyone...
We haven't done enough of that over the last...
Everyone working from home today, hope you're having a nice time, because we're obviously not. Yeah, so sickies will double today. Bunk-off Monday, and millions of workers call in ill to avoid the snow. Now, obviously, for many people, it's the first day back after the Christmas and New Year break as well. Many people have had 2 weeks off. And the weather gives you a bit of an excuse to maybe extend that break. Now, look, don't get me wrong, up in the north it is terribly bad, and we had airports shut at the weekend, football games being potentially called off, etc., etc., and it was awful. However, in many parts of the country, certainly in London and the South East, it's just rain. There's just puddles out there, people.
There's no excuse.
Just go to work.
Down here.
And the security guy said he can't work from home. He can't work from home. He's got to come in, isn't he?
Well, there are so many... it does tend to be the working-class jobs as well, the ones that you can't do from home. The people running the supermarkets, the people running the NHS, you know, the people, the postmen, the dustbin people. I mean, all these people are the ones that have to get out there no matter what the weather and get on with it.
Yeah, exactly that.
So it's all these, you know, and we had stories over the other day, didn't we, about people working from home from a beach in Ibiza.
Exactly.
And from Barbados. People working for local councils.
Yeah, I've got a few friends in corporate jobs today who've got the week off work.
Oh, dears.
And have you affected by the weather over the week? No, not so. Well, yes. My golf was cancelled yesterday.
Oh, my God! How did you...
Snowfall, my golf was cancelled, the mighty Woburn, couldn't get it out there. Oh, can you believe it?
What?
But otherwise,
honestly, how did you...
Love them. My grandkids love the weather.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation. Tonight, Red Rachel from Accounts is clinging on for dear life as her disastrous budget has crashed the economy. The cost of government borrowing has sent the markets into a downward spiral. And once the Prime Minister has to say he has confidence in a minister, the writing is on the wall. The ECHR strikes again. A foreign rapist, whose name we're not allowed to know, avoids deportation because, of all things, he claims to be a bisexual. It's time to free ourselves of this undemocratic foreign court. A GB News exclusive has revealed a whistleblower claimed the inquiry into child sexual abuse was a cover-up which redacted the evidence she provided. Surely it's time for a new national inquiry. Plus, former MI6 chief Sir Richard Dearlove has warned against Chinese investment in our net zero infrastructure, claiming it poses a serious threat to our security. He joins me shortly. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most intellectual panel, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister Sir John Redwood and the former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle. As ever, it's a crucial part of the programme. Let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now, it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Katie Bowen.
Jacob, thank you and good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom.
Some breaking news just coming into us. Joe Biden has delivered a foreign policy speech from the White House a short time ago, saying a Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal is on the brink of fruition. The outgoing US president said the deal would also include a surge of aid to Palestinians in what was his final foreign policy address. We'll bring you more on that as we get it. Keir Starmer says he's completely confident in his team, with his spokesman saying today that Rachel Reeves will stay on as Chancellor until the next general election, following turmoil in the markets. The PM's official spokesman added that Sir Keir Starmer has full confidence in Rachel Reeves and he'll be working with her for the whole of the Parliament. In the past week, there's been a drop in the pound and an increase in borrowing costs, with Downing Street saying nothing is off the table as government departments consider where to cut spending. Ms Reeves has been in China, bolstering ties with the nation, which Senior Cabinet Minister Pat McFadden has today said was in the national interest. Shadow Business Secretary Andrew Griffith said that the Chancellor failed to make some vital decisions in her budget. Speaking in the House of Commons this afternoon, Home Office Minister Jess Phillips said work to implement recommendations made by the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse will be completed as quickly as can possibly be done. That comes as, also this afternoon, the Labour MP for Rotherham, Sarah Champion, has called for a national inquiry into grooming gangs. In a statement posted to X, the MP said that local inquiries do not have the power to compel witnesses or evidence and would not satisfy the public concern of cover-ups. Over the weekend, another Labour MP, Dan Carden, also broke ranks with Sir Keir Starmer to call for an inquiry. He's urging the Prime Minister to use the full power of the state to deliver justice. Officials in Los Angeles said at a press conference today that severe fire weather conditions will continue until Wednesday. LA Mayor Karen Bass said that close to hurricane-force winds have been predicted. At least 24 people have been killed and thousands evacuated as fires rage on in California. 23 people, all adults, remain missing, and more than 92,000 people are currently under evacuation orders, officials said. LA County Sheriff Robert Luna also added that at least 34 people have been arrested. Meanwhile, US President-elect Donald Trump has called politicians in California incompetent over their handling of the fires. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Jacob.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Whatever little credibility Red Rachel from accounts had has now melted away as ice does after a cold spell. How many times did we hear her say that Liz Truss crashed the economy?
They've crashed the economy and then they ran away. And they've left it to the new Labour government to fix the mess that they've created.
Because I will never play fast and loose with the public finances. Liz Truss's mini-budget, the Conservatives' mini-budget, crashed the economy, has sent mortgage rates spiralling and put pensions in peril. I will never play fast and loose with the public finances because when you do so, you put family finances at risk. In their clamour to cut taxes for the richest, they crashed the economy.
Well, she doesn't really have a clue, does she? Red Rachel is now facing a government debt crisis all of her very own. Last week, the cost of borrowing reached the highest level it has been this century, surpassing the days of the Truss-Kwarteng mini-budget. Debt to GDP is now over 100%. That means our debt is larger than our economy for the first time since the 1960s, which is all a bit of a problem because we've found that the gilt market is the ultimate measure of confidence, and confidence is evaporating. And instead of focusing on her job and answering questions at home to reassure the markets, over the weekend she swanned off to Red China to perform a ceremonial kowtow in the hope that it would yield a paltry £600 million of investment. Earlier today, the Prime Minister was busy extolling the virtues of AI and how it can lead to government efficiency. So we thought it only fair to ask Elon Musk's Grok to give us a picture and show us an image of Red Rachel from accounts with Xi Jinping. She may feel safe in Red China, but during the Prime Minister's AI press conference today, he said this amidst the plunging confidence in his Chancellor.
Confident in our mission for growth, and I'm completely confident in my team. We never pretended, nor would anybody sensibly argue, that after 14 years of failure, you can turn around our economy and our public services before Christmas. The question is, are you creating the conditions? Do you have the determination? And are you pulling the right levers for growth?
But notably, he didn't answer Christopher Hope's question, will Rachel Reeves be the Chancellor at the next election? A government spokesman later clarified that she would be, but as everyone knows, when the Prime Minister has to declare competence in a minister, the writing is in the wall. And for those of you who remember your scripture lessons, you will recall that it says to Red Rachel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Or more directly, mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. As ever, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm now joined by my panel, former Conservative Cabinet Minister Sir John Redwood and the former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle. Lloyd, let me come to you first. Rachel Reeves, Red Rachel, kept on saying she wouldn't play fast and loose, and everything she has done has made things worse. First of all, she talked down the economy, she talked doom and gloom. Then she attacked businesses, and then she goes off to China when she ought to be at home, trying to reassure the markets that she's actually got a plan and has a clue what she's doing.
Well, I think the thing that killed Liz Truss's budget was the effect that it had on mortgage rates and pensions. As yet, we've not seen that effect. There is going to potentially be a huge effect on government spending, potential cuts to government departments, but the population, as yet, haven't felt this pinch. And the reality is it doesn't matter what the markets do in terms of voting terms. It matters a lot in the economic terms, but in voting terms, what matters is the effect that it has in people's pockets or the services they receive. And so she still has a window to turn this around and to make good. And not all of that will be her doing. Some of that will be just how the markets react on the global markets, which borrowing has increased on the global markets more broadly, not just in England.
But she's got very little time because the Bank of England has its next Monetary Policy Committee meeting in February. Interest rates are expected to fall. If they don't, that has an effect on business, an effect on floating mortgage rates. The 5-year mortgage rate has already been going back up along with 5-year government debt. So it's already hitting people.
It is starting to hit people, and perceptions are also reality for a lot of people in this. I think you make a bit too much about Rachel needing to be here rather than China. If we are to resolve a lot of this, it will also be through trade, and it will also be through sorting out some of our trade balances, sorting out how we transform to a manufacturing base that just doesn't rely on single countries. And so making arrangements with China on that is a sensible thing to be doing. So I think it's a bit unfair to suggest she's run off to China to kowtow. No, unless you deal with China, you can't deal with our underlying weaknesses in our economy.
But, John, she only got 600 million, supposedly, from China. It wasn't
over 5 years.
Over 5 years, which was negligible.
And we import 57 billion a year, and there was no comment from her about how much more she's given in on us taking imports when quite a lot of other countries are getting more hostile, thinking that China is a trade cheat. But what is going wrong is having direct impact on most of us. And job vacancies are down. It is going to be more difficult to get a job. Wages won't go up so much, although inflation is on the rise because of the squeeze that this is all creating. And as we've heard, there are going to have to be much bigger cuts in public spending because she has totally unrealistic figures for public spending 2, 3, 4 years out, the very headline figures she's got. And she's soon got to give us some detailed proposals. And there's going to be huge battles around the cabinet table over how nothing is affordable.
And there's a fundamental difference between what's happening to us and what's happening in the US. In the US, interest rates are rising because the economy is growing. Here, interest rates are rising because we're over-indebted and it looks as if inflation is being created deliberately by government policy.
Yes, and we've gone up a little bit more than America and quite a lot more than Germany. But the big sign that it isn't right and there is a special British problem is dollar up, pound down, euro up, pound down. It's the pound crisis she needs to worry about because it shows it is her policy and it is something unique to Britain at a time when some other interest rates are going up around the world.
And this is a real problem because in an era of floating exchange rates, you may have to put up short-term interest rates, exactly the thing the economy doesn't need, because of a loss of confidence of financial markets in what's going on domestically. as a direct consequence of a budget that really bashed business?
Well, I think that you are exaggerating slightly that it really bashed business. There were a few stings in the tail there, particularly the national insurance
Well,
threshold.
40 billion of money that is not going to be available for jobs and profits.
Particularly the national insurance thresholds, not the actual percentage rate, which probably most would counter, and it would just be a suppression of wages, but the threshold is a suppression
really important.
of jobs. You're right. And I think that, but that has not actually been implemented yet. That gets implemented in the new financial year.
But it is by the companies, because they're looking ahead.
We will see whether all of that gets implemented or some parts of it get delayed, or even more
That's interesting.
that we will see if what will happen is there will be other measures. I think there will need to be some other measures that give confidence to businesses to start to invest. I'm not sure you'll have a complete reversal of the policies, but you will see other things that mitigate
You're
against
sounding
it.
like the King's Speech. Other measures will be presented to Parliament.
Well, that's great news. We do need a reversal, because hitting jobs in this crazy way gets rid of growth altogether and then makes everything else unaffordable.
Well, I thought Rupert Soames from the CBI was pushing on the radio this morning for a reversal of the threshold change.
Yes. It's the threshold changes that most businesses report to me to say they struggled to plan for, because they can plan for percentage increases here.
Most chancellors, when they start U-turning on their budget within a few months of it, find that they're not chancellor for very much longer.
And that's why I don't think there will be a direct U-turn, but there will need to be some mitigation. Now, I don't understand why there wasn't more focus on sorting out some of the discrepancies of national insurance versus income tax that you see around the £100,000 amount, around higher tax rate goers then dip off and actually reduce what they pay. That pensioners, as soon as you get to pensionable age, even if you're still working full-time, you suddenly have a reduction in your tax that you pay. Those things, if you sorted out that, it would create a fairer tax system, and she would generate more money than the threshold change.
But the problem with that is that we see with VAT, when people tidy things up, it causes a huge political problem. It's not as easy as it sounds, and the revenue from it's quite slight. It's basically spending's too high.
And I don't think they want to help people on those sort of incomes, and they don't want to help people on much lower incomes than that, or a lot of people anywhere in the private sector. This is a government of the public sector, for the public sector, and it wants the private sector to pay more.
Fair. She worked for Halifax.
Well, she may have done then, but she works in the public sector now, doesn't she? And all the extra money went to the public sector. And we've heard today the answer is AI, more computing, and they want the state to pay for much more of that. They want a big sovereign computing capability, they say. Where's the money for that? They can't afford what they're doing at the moment, and without money, that's a nonsense.
No, but a lot of that will build efficiencies, and it will make things cheaper. The NHS is on its knees and is a cash pot that will never stop asking for more money unless you make strategic changes and structural changes in it, in how it works, and AI is part of that. It means that you don't have to rely on people going to their GP to access all forms of services.
OK, well, you've got to sack staff with the first-year costs of doing that if you're going to get those benefits. And what the civil service is saying to them is put the money up front, spend a lot on computers, and then maybe we get to the productivity gains. Why don't we get back the lost productivity of the last 6 years? We didn't have AI in 2019. We were an awful lot more productive in the public sector then than today. It's a scandal. They're not trying to get that back.
That must be right.
Look, there are big problems with productivity around the NHS particularly, but other public sector areas. And some of that is about the shift in work patterns that people expect to be able to work versus the remuneration. So we've had a freeze effectively on doctors' pay in this country. So whereas before we used to say to doctors, and the old phrase was we shoved their mouths with gold, wasn't it, when we created the NHS, doctors and consultants, we will pay you very well. We will allow you also to do private practice, but we expect you to be on the end of a phone night or day to look after your patients.
And now we pay them very well, and they're not on the end of the telephone.
Now we don't pay them so well, and we've chosen to restrict their pay, and they say, OK, restrict my pay, but I won't work as hard. That's the productivity problem.
Well, thank you to my panel. A picture of Red Rachel may have popped up on your screens performing the kowtow, which was generated by AI. I thought we would tie in the Reverend Starmer's delight in AI just to show you that. Anyway, in a moment we'll be discussing the foreign bisexual rapist who can't be deported from the UK because of his human rights. What else? Thank you very much.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
TikTok chefs, Instagram chefs, that they put children off or young people off of cooking because it's so expertly done they can't do it. No, my young lad, he's 17, he is amazing in the kitchen. Oh, he is. He's amazing in the kitchen. And he gets it all off TikTok. He comes down, he can put burgers, wraps, stews, curries, sauces, and the smells in the kitchen. I said, where'd you get these? Oh, just TikTok, I'm trying it out. And it's just amazing the things that he can conjure up. So for some people, it might be... it's an inspiration for him. So they're saying that's intimidation. For my boy, it's an inspiration. They say it's entertainment. For my boy, it's an infomercial. I watch him doing his stuff. At that stage, I could do baked beans on toast and knock up a salad. That was it. But my boy can do all sorts of stuff.
It makes it accessible as well, doesn't it? Because lots of people say, like, you need an education to be in the kitchen, or you need to go find yourself loads of cookbooks. But you don't.
No.
You go on your phone now.
Well, I mean, like, all the spices, sesame oil. I mean, I'm amazed at the stuff that he does. So it's encouraging. All you just need is a kitchen well-stocked and have a go. And understand that failure is actually the route to learning. I mean, he's made mistakes, he's stuck stuff in the bin, but that young man, I am amazed at some of the stuff he does.
I don't mind cooking at all. It's cleaning up that I have the problem with. Dawn, let's talk about sex.
Can I just say there are things called restaurants, by the way? Just put that one. Oh, my hell, I don't even know where the kitchen is.
OK.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about the economy and read Rachel. And Mike says Rachel Reeves is taking this country into recession and maybe a slump. She has no real understanding of economics, and it shows. Starmer will back her solely because he also has no idea what to do. The sad truth is there is a total lack of talent within the Labour ranks at Westminster, and it will cost us all very badly. Peter, I think, was interested in the AI image of Red Rachel, which I think we're going to show you now. And he says, you're being rotten to poor dear Rachel. Rotten, just because she's economically illiterate. And Dean says, the shock to the UK nation of a UK Chancellor bowing or begging on her knees to China is a symbolic of a low she will go to try and bolster the economy. Well, if only she could bolster the economy, we would all be happier. It was, I repeat again, AI. It wasn't real physically, though I think it was spiritually. The European Convention on Human Rights, in its mighty wisdom, has struck again. Because of our membership of this foreign court and agreement, the United Kingdom is unable to deport a foreign rapist who claimed he didn't know it was wrong to have sex with a sleeping woman, because he is, of all things, bisexual. A specialist tribunal ruled he couldn't be sent back to Jamaica on the grounds that he would be targeted by violent gangs owing to his sexuality. What's more, we're not allowed to know his name. Well, I'm joined now by the human rights lawyer, Shab Khan. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. This type of case is the case that brings the Convention of Human Rights into disrepute, isn't it?
Hi, thanks. I mean, firstly, obviously important to say that this is a UK court, a UK tribunal that makes this decision, nothing to do with the European court. And just another really brief general point, I think, it's quite offensive, let's say, or generally quite tiresome now, how politicians or journalists, everyone is sort of, just in the habit of second guessing any judgments made by our courts. I mean, regardless of whatever has been happening in the past few decades, the one thing that, we are actually genuinely world leading in is our justice system, our judiciary, probably the only thing that we do actually lead the world in. So I think it is quite wrong for us to, without knowing the evidence, without knowing the details, be having these discussions and trying to somehow suggest that the judge got the decision wrong.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us to discuss and debate the decision of judges. I think we're entirely entitled to do that. It's a matter of freedom of speech. And judges make some crackpot decisions, and this seems to be one of them. I don't think we should kowtow to judges any more than Red Rachel should kowtow to the President of China.
But what I don't understand is, I'm not really sure those people who are obviously objecting to this decision, are we saying that even if he is bisexual, he should still be deported to Jamaica, even if he'll be tortured and killed? Or are we saying
he's not going to be tortured in Jamaica?
We have no idea about that. And the thing is,
the Jamaican government is a civilized government. It's a friendly nation. Well, it's just sort of nonsense. People may disapprove of him, but they'll disapprove of him in England for being a criminal. He's a rapist, for heaven's sake. I'd send him back regardless.
Obviously, the court heard expert evidence. They've got country guidance. That's the basis on which Home Office makes these decisions. And if that guidance suggested, research suggested, experts suggested that he would be tortured, then I don't see why we're second-guessing that.
The Home Office, from what I've read about the case, found no evidence in his previous conduct that he was bisexual. All his relationships the Home Office was aware of were with women, so he may well not be telling the truth. And why can't we know his name? If he's Mr. Snodgrass, why doesn't that get released? Why do the courts cover this up?
Well, there is a reason for that. And that's mainly because, especially if we decided now that he has to stay in there because his life might be in danger, then of course we don't want the Jamaican community, Jamaican government somehow finding out. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that.
Why don't we want the Jamaican government? I mean, the Jamaican government is a civilised Commonwealth government. What have you got against the Jamaican government?
What I have against them is that obviously, every country, including Britain, we all have our prejudices, we have our biases. There are always times that certain groups are targeted, either institutionally or otherwise within communities. And I think we have to understand that. So to somehow
I don't mind people being a little bit disapproving of rapists as a general rule.
Well, yes, no, but that's my point. Is that what we're saying? That because he's a rapist, he's a bad person? Therefore,
yes, I am saying that.
Yes, so even if he will be tortured and killed, he should be sent back. Or are we saying that, no, we disagree with the judge?
Jamaica is a civilised country. We're not talking about sending him back to Afghanistan.
No, so I mean, are you suggesting that despite all the evidence, despite all the research, you are confident that no bisexuals or homosexuals are discriminated against in Jamaica? Is that actually
there seemed to be very little evidence that he was bisexual, according to the Home Office. Frankly, I'm not too fussed. He's a rapist. He has no business being in this country. He should go home.
If what we're saying, so that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm not sure are we saying that he didn't have enough evidence, so we don't know he's bisexual? Therefore,
well, the Home Office said they'd seen no evidence of this. It just seems to me that people can quote human rights, come up with any lie they feel like. They're then anonymous and they're not sent home, and it means we allow criminals to stay in this country who sometimes re-offend, putting British people at risk.
No, but who do you think should be the best judge? Well, I use the judge, but, the best adjudicator of whether or not he's telling the truth? Who should be deciding? Shouldn't it just be the judge in court?
The Home Office who would have got him out. I think it's human rights law that is putting judges above our democratic decision-making.
So judges should not be reviewing Home Office decisions? Is that what we're actually saying?
I think ministerial decisions... We should go back to the Wednesbury test of irrationality for overturning ministerial decisions.
Yeah, no, but this isn't a ministerial decision. This was an administrative decision.
It's on behalf of ministers. It's on behalf of the Home Secretary.
Taken every year. So, no, I mean, obviously, this wasn't a judicial review. If we're talking about Wednesbury, that's obviously a technicality we're discussing. But this isn't a judicial review. This was an appeal where someone goes to court and says, I don't believe the Home Office looked at my case fairly, so can you please review it? Are you genuinely saying we should abolish all courts that look at administrative decisions?
I'm saying we should deport rapists and that we should pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights if that stops us deporting rapists. It's as simple as that.
regardless of whether they might be tortured or killed.
If Jamaica is so dangerous, he should have known this before he committed a rape. It's part of the deterrent. You go back to your own country if you break the laws in this country. It's
now
really
that
straightforward.
hasn't happened, as a civilized country, as of today, what do? We know he will be tortured and killed if we put him on a plane. Should we still do that?
All right, well, Shab, I've given you the last word. Thank you for joining us. Much appreciated. In a moment, our whistleblower has thrown Labour's entire argument about a grooming gang inquiry into doubt. Find out why after these messages from our sponsors.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. It's quite a mild picture at the moment for many of us, and there is some rain around, but across the far south it's a bit colder with a touch of frost overnight because of how close we are to this high pressure to the southeast of us. And actually, as the front that's brought quite a bit of rain across northern areas today bashes against that high pressure, we're going to see the rain easing. Nonetheless, we are going to have some fairly cloudy, damp weather across central parts of the UK, particularly northern and central England and into Wales. A bit of drizzly rain likely here. Like I said, though, in the far south, clearer skies, leading to temperatures dropping, a touch of frost, even some freezing fog patches to watch out for first thing tomorrow morning. So yes, it is going to be a cold start for some of us, especially in the south. Any freezing fog patches should clear relatively quickly as we go through the morning, but some of them could linger for a little while. A damper picture first thing across more central areas, but across Northern Ireland and Scotland, after a largely dry night, just a few coastal showers around, it should be a largely fine start to the day. There will be quite a bit of cloud around, but across eastern parts to the lee of high ground, with the winds coming in from the west-southwest, there should be some breaks, and those breaks are going to continue through the day tomorrow. So some sunshine for eastern parts in particular, but across more central areas of the UK staying cloudy, that front gradually making its way southwards, and more drizzly rain to come as well. The best chance of any sunshine will be towards the south-southwest of England. Even here, though, the cloud building through the afternoon. Temperatures a little bit on the mild side, generally getting into double figures for most of us. As we look ahead to Wednesday, and it's a largely dry day for many of us, a front tries to bring some wetter, windier weather to the far northwest of the UK, but doesn't bring a huge amount. Otherwise, we're going to see increasing amounts of sunshine from the northwest, but generally staying cloudy towards the southeast, and quite a bit more cloud to come as we go through the end of the week, though looking largely dry. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, because the failure is
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. We were talking about the European Convention on Human Rights, and the mail logs have come in. Ursula says it's time to look at our legal aid system for convicted criminals and their human rights lawyers. And Graham says, why do these irrational left-wing apologists think that the UK should tolerate and give refuge to every criminal in the world purely because their own nations would not put up with them? Which seems a very fair point. Ever since the government rejected Oldham Council's call for a national inquiry into grooming gangs, Labour has hidden behind the shield of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, promising to implement its recommendations. Yet the inquiry was too broad. And now, GB News exclusive from Charlie Peters has revealed that the Rochdale whistleblower, Maggie Oliver, has alleged the inquiry was a cover-up, with most of her evidence being redacted from it. 3 Labour MPs have broken ranks now and called for an inquiry, including the Rotherham MP, Sarah Champion. Well, my panel's still with me, Conservative Cabinet Minister Sir John Redwood and former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle. This is a very important exclusive, isn't it, from Charlie Peters, that the inquiry didn't produce all the evidence, redacted some of it, and anyway wasn't focused on this issue of gang attacks.
Yes, it's a devastating addition to the case for this inquiry. Most of the public want this inquiry. Most Labour voters want the inquiry. They're quite right to. Aren't we all completely scandalised and shocked? Aren't we appalled by what happened to those poor girls? I mean, anybody's been a father, and just imagine it, a young girl, not a woman, being treated in this way, drugged, raped. It's just dreadful, and on a massive scale.
Massive scale, hundreds of them. It is almost impossible to read about. It is so revolting. 3 Labour MPs have now called for it. I think that's very important because in a new parliament, MPs are usually very disciplined, particularly new ones of the governing party. I just don't understand why the government doesn't get this, doesn't understand that it needs to do something, answer the anger people feel.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'm minded to say that there needs to be an inquiry. Keir last week seemed to open up the door a tiny bit by saying, I'm not against an inquiry in principle. My view is that the time is running out now for the public to be won back over that the Labour Party's got this right. They need to come and say, we will have an inquiry. I think they can still say, we will have an inquiry that will start in 6 months because we want to implement the J report recommendations in the next 6 months. But they have to give a time when it will start, and it has to be within, I think, the next 12 months for people to believe that they want to do something. I think it is fair for the government to say, we would prefer to start a new inquiry after we've implemented the legal recommendations of the last inquiry, even though we recognise the last inquiry was broad, and then we want to focus on specifics. But I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. And I think what you can do is you can say, look, this is the timetable for this inquiry, and this is the timetable for implementing those recommendations of the last inquiry.
Dragged their feet on the inquiry recommendations because there was a bill in the last Parliament. Now, this government has carried on with quite a number of bills that were in the last Parliament, but not the one that was implementing some of the recommendations of this inquiry.
No, they have brought forward a number of amendments of other bills that are going through that will put the J report recommendations in. And Yvette Cooper has said by the end of this parliamentary year, so within the next 6 months, she will have implemented those additional recommendations. So there is a timetable for that, but failure to say, and we will confirm that we will then have an inquiry on grooming gangs. And I think the inquiry should be on all forms of organised grooming gangs, which of course will focus on the predominantly Pakistani gangs, but can be also wider to other groups of people who are in this country. But it needs to be focused on grooming gangs, because that's very different from wider sexual exploitation.
Wes Streeting over the weekend made a comment about New Zealand and race riots in New Zealand and seemed to be indicating that pointing the finger at Pakistani gangs was a mistake. Now, that really worried me because partly I think he's a sensible man, and I was surprised he, of all people, said it. But it seems to be going back into that mindset that allowed this not to be investigated properly in the first place.
Yeah, I thought that was a shocking mistake by him, and again, misjudging the mood that most of us feel. And I don't think the inquiry should specify who the rapist gangs are. It should be about rapist gangs, and it is whoever the criminals are in this case. And why weren't they prosecuted? Why wasn't the establishment horrified by this? What was the role of a lot of councils, senior councillors and senior officials in councils? What was the role of the prosecuting authorities? That's what we need to know about, because everybody else thinks a lot of these men should have been prosecuted and given severe sentences, assuming they were guilty.
And how do you stop it happening again if you have this culture of fear about racial disorder if you prosecute people?
Yes, I mean, you've clearly got to be completely blind to the background of criminals. You're dealing with criminals, and they are who they are, and if a lot of them belong to a certain community or have a certain set of views, you can't disguise that. They need to be prosecuted. But they're prosecuted because they're criminals, not because of anything else.
Not because of that. And the principle of equality in front of the law is fundamental.
I don't think I have seen evidence, and I'm open to see it, that this is an ongoing issue, that now police are still covering it up, ongoing. there's a lot of evidence that's come forward that up to very recently, police were covering it up. So I don't think, unless you're going to present me new evidence, that this is because you said, how do we stop this happening again? I don't think it's happening because I think police forces up and down this country and councils up and down this country have been shook, just like the public, just like you and I have been, from these explosions.
I hope you're right.
So I think that has stopped. I think it is about making sure that we have truth and justice from the past.
I hope you're right. The thing that worries me is that you'd have thought that 5 years ago, and for some reason the cover-ups continued. But we need to move on to the Foreign Office, which has admitted the UK has yet to complete a deal with Mauritius to give them the Chagos Islands, but that, quote, good progress is being made in the surrender talks. But this supposed progress comes just 1 week before President-elect Donald Trump is inaugurated, and it has been rumoured that he could veto any deal on his return to office. Let's hope he can save us from ourselves. Well, back to our panel. Lloyd, this is the government at its cheese-eating surrender monkey worst, isn't it?
I don't think that Trump does get a veto on this, and I think this government is going to probably push it forward no matter what. Now, I think that's a great shame because it should be down to the Chagosians, and international law, in my understanding, is cleared. Whatever advisory opinions you might have from courts, the population is sovereign, and we should have managed to get the Chagosians on our side of these negotiations, and that's what would have trumped any judgment from a court. Instead, what we did is we ignored a lot of the Chagosians who live just up the road from me in Gatwick, waiting still to get on that plane any day now to return home, which is what they want to do, and return home not to Mauritius, but to the Chagos Islands, either as British or independent, and we should give people the right to choose.
Well, John, I know you've spent a lot of time looking at the legal aspect of this. What is our obligation in terms of the International Court?
Well, we lost in an advisory judgment where the court was on the side of Mauritius. We don't think Mauritius has a claim to these islands. They didn't own them in the past. And the Chagosians don't want to become part of Mauritius. A lot of them are now British citizens. And I've got here a document which sets out very clearly from the International Court that it cannot bind the UK ever in this case. They can't go on from a wrong advisory opinion to a formal judgment because they cannot bind Britain on anything to do with a Commonwealth country. And so I don't know why the government has been conned into believing that they have a legal obligation.
It's beyond the powers of this court. The court does not even claim the power to issue a binding judgment.
That's what this says. You can't do it.
And that's really important because the government line has been, we've got to do this because of the International Court and we follow international law. That's not actually true.
If it was binding, Mauritius themselves would have had to have brought the case to the International Court, and then it is a case between Mauritius versus the UK. Mauritius were not even allowed to bring the case because they didn't have the right standing because of those clauses. So what they did instead is they went to the General Assembly and they asked an organ of the UN to ask the courts to give them an advisory opinion that is non-binding on what they think might happen if the arguments were made. And, of course, the arguments weren't made in the same way that you would if it was two parties actually arguing it out.
And what about the Falklands? How do you feel if you're a Falkland Islander now when the principle of self-determination has been abandoned? Are we going to lease back the Falklands from the Argentinians for billions of pounds? I mean, if you were Milei, who's quite a punchy figure, I rather admire him in many ways, you'd be thinking, gosh, I could do with a few of those British billions too.
And, of course, you'd never do that because you've lost sovereignty. And so then Argentina could start dictating some of the things to people who have no wish to be part of Argentina. And we, the British taxpayers, will be paying for a fast. I mean, nobody who owns their own house says, I'm going to give my house to somebody else and then I'm going to pay them a whole load of money to lease it back. It's completely mad. And we are inflaming Trump and his Secretary of State-elect because they want stability in their use of that very big naval base on the Chagos Islands, which we lease to them. They trust us as one of their principal allies. If Mauritius takes it over and they have to lease it back, Mauritius is a non-nuclear country,
But I think we're
example.
inflaming them actually in the other direction as well. Trump is going on this mad one about Greenland, which to us should be a total red line. We should be very clear. We don't do this idea that other countries can bully parts of other countries to come into their country. It's not how things are done. But the very fact that we're now giving up the ghost in one set of islands to say, well, actually, you can do deals to just, like you used to do in the 18th century or the 19th century, like kind of, that is meant to be the past. But because we've opened up that door, the Trumpians of the world will say, well, OK, if you can do it with Chagos and Mauritius, I want to do a deal and cut a deal with Greenland. And I think that's the bigger danger, actually, that other bigger states start saying, well, if you've opened the door, we want to have a discussion about everything.
I just want to ask John one final thing. Should we as Conservatives take some of the blame? Because these negotiations started when we were in office. It's not just Keir Starmer.
Yeah, but I don't think the Conservatives have to take the blame, because when David Cameron turned up as Foreign Secretary, and I and one or two others spoke to him, we're very relieved that he took one look at this and said, no way. And he said, no, he wasn't going to do it. And it was put away, and then the officials got it all out again when the new government arrived, and they fell for it. And I think it's dreadful. They've fallen for it. And just think of the pensioners who are really missing the grant they would have been getting without the cut in the budget. And then they're going to be told that money's going to be given to Mauritius to let them take away an island we should carry on owning. That's just madness.
Well, we have a Foreign Secretary who appeared on Mastermind, so he must be quite a clever fellow, really. Anyway, thank you to my panel. In a moment, we'll be looking at how the Labour government plans to hand its power to Peking with the former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews travel destinations forecast.
If you're looking for some winter sunshine across the Mediterranean at the moment, then western areas are your best bet. High pressure here is bringing relatively fine conditions across Iberia into parts of France as well. But we have the remnants of Storm Felix still lingering around for parts of Italy, Greece and Turkey. This is bringing some heavy showers, which could fall even as snow across inland areas. Generally, though, the showers are expected to ease as we head through the forthcoming week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews travel destinations forecast.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Look, if people want to do Veganuary, that's all well and good, but it shouldn't be forced on people, should it? Or even strongly suggested by something like the NHS?
It's not being forced on anybody. People can choose in the Wirral or any other NH trust that gets involved whether they want to partake or not. What they're doing are promoting the benefits of a vegan diet. Now, you imagine you're the NHS trust. You've got one person dying every 3 minutes from heart disease, and vegans get much less high blood pressure, much less heart disease than do meat eaters. So surely, if your job is to promote health, then you should let people know these kind of stats. Vegans get less cancer. Red meat is a class 1 carcinogen, classed by the World Health Organization as processed meat definitely causes cancer of the bowel. So it's just letting people know what the health advantages are of reducing or taking meat completely out of your diet and becoming vegan. You get less diabetes type 2, which is a big problem in the UK, less deaths from stroke, and around 1/5 less of all cancers. Imagine it was drugs that had that kind of impact. People would be hailing it and going, wow, this is amazing.
To call it about diversity and inclusion, I just think that's a load of nonsense. This is a move away by public bodies from this compulsory veganism. Look, your speaker from Viva, which is a very hardline animal rights organisation, attempts to talk about the environment and other issues, but really this to them is about animal rights. They don't believe in a world where we should use animals. I completely disagree with the speaker. I respect her right to say that, of course, but I completely disagree. And that's why the NHS and public bodies just shouldn't be getting involved in things that are so controversial.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here
We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. We were talking about grooming gangs and Chagos Islands, and the mail mogs have come in. Robert says there is an obvious need for a swift, time-limited inquiry into the grooming gang issue, simply for the sake of the victims, if nothing else. The public are simply sickened by this matter, and the resistance from Starmer suggests a cover-up. And Bill says, similarly, hi, Jacob, there will and must be an independent inquiry into grooming gangs, and the quicker, the better. Well, not only has the British billionaire Jim Ratcliffe warned that the net zero agenda will devastate British industry, but the former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, has claimed it hands power to Peking. It has been rumoured that Labour is courting Chinese investors to pour money into manufacturing or assembly plants in the UK to achieve its costly net zero ambitions. But Sir Richard Dearlove has warned against prioritising green ideology over vulnerability to communist China. Well, I'm joined now by the man himself, the very distinguished former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove. Sir Richard, thank you for joining me. Can you explain what the risk is from China so I can understand it properly?
OK, we are increasing our dependence in renewables on Chinese green technology. The problem is, in future, if we have a crisis with China and we have a sort of confrontation internationally, it's quite possible for the Chinese to insert in the manufacturing process cellular modules into pretty much anything which is electronic, which can then be reprogrammed at China's will. So, for example, if we have a ton of wind turbines in our renewable energy systems, China at some point in the future could switch them off. And we've been around this circuit already with 5G and Huawei, and you'll remember the dispute, and the government initially, Conservative government, assured us that this was fine. Eventually, some of us lobbying hard from the side persuaded the government that actually it was very unwise to put all our cards on Chinese technology with regard to 5G. Now, energy infrastructure is just as critical as 5G, and that basically is the problem. I'm not saying it would happen, but it certainly could happen. Why expose ourselves to this sort of vulnerability when we really don't need to?
But there are methods for protecting us from this, because the Secretary of State for Business role I once held gets briefed on any takeover of a British company where we're worried that Chinese technology or technology from any country that we think may not be friendly could be inserted to protect our national infrastructure. Do you think that's not enough?
I don't think that's sufficient, because embedded cellular modules which can be connected to the Internet of Things, it's very, very hard to unpack all of that. So we're creating a vulnerability that we do not need to have by pursuing what is actually subsidized technology by the Chinese Communist state. And it seems to me that this is an extraordinary vulnerability for us to, as it were, create for ourselves. But I mean, there's a double problem, because you've got the Chinese perspective, but you've also got, because of the insistence on renewables, the government pursuing a highly disordered energy policy, which is vulnerable to breakdown. And in fact, I'm sure some of your listeners are aware that last week the government panicked and had to buy, through what's called the Viking Connector, £21 million of gas on last Wednesday, because we were running out of fuel, because there was no sunshine, there was no wind, and renewables didn't produce any electricity or generation at all. So you've got a combination, you've got a conjunction of two issues, which is putting us in the most extraordinarily vulnerable situation.
And how much time have we got to act? Because to what extent will China already have put these systems into equipment that they have sold us? Are we already in the position effectively, not quite to the same degree, that Hezbollah was in with its communications devices, with Israel having loaded them up with explosives? And I'm not saying the Chinese have done that, but through the chip control.
How many minutes to midnight? I mean, we could rectify the situation by investing in our own gas production.
Yes.
Because we all want to pursue net zero. We've got two domestic options. One is nuclear power, and one is using up our own gas resources. Now, we all want to get to net zero at some point in time. We're pursuing
actually. I think
okay.
I don't think it'll make any difference.
All right, it may not make any difference, but it's probably, generally speaking, a good idea in the longer term. But to have a policy which is completely impractical is absolutely ridiculous. We're pursuing an ideology. We're not pursuing science. We're creating an energy system which has very high entropy, and that's very dangerous for the UK.
And we're going to need more energy. It's very interesting, the Prime Minister talking about AI today. The one thing we know about AI is that it uses enormous quantities of electricity. And to make AI work, you need not only plenty of it, but you need cheap electricity if we're to be a global leader in AI.
Jacob, you've taken the words out of my mouth. And we have this new headline, I think, to distract us from the problems that Rachel Rees is having. And we absolutely have to have a reliable energy system, particularly if we're going to have massive consumption in new data warehouses, which is the case that you're talking about.
And we're sitting on all this gas, which we could get out of the ground by fracking, and that would give us security of energy, independence from China, and we could go to the races with AI.
Independence from imports from Qatar as well in a very destabilized Middle East. I mean, it's just crazy. We have our own gas resources. We don't even have to worry about the oil, but we could use that as well. And
Richard, it's a delight to have you on.
Resources.
It seems to me you're the last head of the Secret Services who actually could have starred in a James Bond film, which always makes it fun to have you with us. Up next, it's the great, the one and only Patrick Christys. Patrick, what's on your programme this evening?
It's an absolutely bombshell show tonight, Jacob. At 10 p.m, we've got an exclusive interview with Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch. I've had advanced sight of it, what she said to Charlie Peters. It's going to be leading tomorrow's news agenda, so you might as well get it here at 10 p.m. She says some astonishing things. But in a few moments' time, at 9 p.m, I'm going to be joined by Maggie Oliver. We have a big announcement when it comes to the victims of Pakistani rape gangs right across the country. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, people really must listen to Maggie Oliver. I think what she's going to say is so important. That's coming up after the weather. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg. This has been State of the Nation. And in Somerset, the weather's really picking up. It's getting quite balmy. If any of you are thinking of going to the Caribbean for a winter holiday, don't. Just go to Somerset. Go away to England. It's much more fun.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. It's quite a mild picture at the moment for many of us, and there is some rain around. But across the far south, it's a bit colder with a touch of frost overnight because of how close we are to this high pressure to the southeast of us. And actually, as the front that's brought quite a bit of rain across northern areas today bashes against that high pressure, we're going to see the rain easing. Nonetheless, we are going to have some fairly cloudy, damp weather across central parts of the UK, particularly northern and central England and into Wales. A bit of drizzly rain likely here. Like I said, though, in the far south, clearer skies leading to temperatures dropping, a touch of frost, even some freezing fog patches to watch out for first thing tomorrow morning. So yes, it is going to be a cold start for some of us, especially in the south. Any freezing fog patches should clear relatively quickly as we go through the morning, but some of them could linger for a little while. A damper picture first thing across more central areas, but across Northern Ireland and Scotland after for a largely dry night, just a few coastal showers around. It should be a largely fine start to the day. There will be quite a bit of cloud around, but across eastern parts to the lee of high ground, with the winds coming in from the west-southwest, there should be some breaks. And those breaks are going to continue through the day tomorrow. So some sunshine for eastern parts in particular, but across the more central areas of the UK, staying cloudy, that front gradually making its way southwards, and more drizzly rain to come as well. The best chance of any sunshine will be towards the south-southwest of England. Even here, though, the cloud building through the afternoon. Temperatures a little bit on the mild side, generally getting into double figures for most of us. As we look ahead to Wednesday, and it's a largely dry day for many of us, a front tries